My name is Greg Peterson. To Andy, Pam, grandchildren, our deepest condolences, and thanks for the privilege to speak about your dad, your grandpa, about the Robert Jackson Center. I admit when I was asked by Pam to do this, a tsunami of memories. Some, by the way, you can see on YouTube, in case you're curious. Due to the time constraints, this will be shorter than the time to read most of Doug's emails, albeit very insightful. Whether discussing with Doug his native Clymer, New York, Chautauqua Institution, Bemis Point, Robert H. Jackson Center, or Lake Chautauqua, you felt you were dealing with a force of nature. His intellectual curiosity was endless, always digging deep and trying to connect dots, as he did with the Neckers family and Robert H. Jackson. He got there very fast to connect all that. Our worlds initially crossed in 2001 when he, together with his ever-encouraging wife, Suzanne, attended a CNN live broadcast of the surviving Nuremberg trial prosecutors at the Robert H. Jackson Center located in Jamestown, New York. I must tell you, as an aside, serendipity. We all have iPhones, hopefully you have them off. Mine picture popped yesterday, as if Doug was speaking to me, and it was a picture of Suzanne that he took with two of the surviving Nuremberg prosecutors, as if I needed to talk about that. So I will. Afterwards, this is in 2001, he sought me out as one of the center's founders and immediately wanted to quiz the participants. He wanted to go right through me to them on the long-forgotten research project he had at Hope College on IG Farben, and the conundrum of German physicians trying to do good research, which led to horrific Xylon B results. Kristen McMahon, in the obituary, she's the president and CEO of the Jackson Center, mentioned he was interested, and he mentioned this, in the work of the center because it disturbed him that German organic chemists contributed so heavily to the atrocities of the Holocaust. The ultimate situation ethics. He was concerned. The result of this intellectual curiosity, he connected with me. And his involvement was not only attending, he then got involved as a board member of the Robert H. Jackson Center, elevated to chairman of the Robert H. Jackson Center. He exposed us to academic programs at Bowling Green State University because he was a dot connector. He brought us in. Next thing you know, I'm giving speeches. Next thing you know, we're bringing in all kinds of Nuremberg trial people. Next thing you know, we're holding Nuremberg trial conferences at Bowling Green because Doug was in the middle of it. That's the kind of guy he was. We were doing programs at Toledo, attending at Chautauqua Institution. He taught. He taught at Chautauqua. He taught at the Robert Jackson Center. He taught. He wanted to share his intellectual curiosity of history and how it connected, not only to the Jackson Center, but most recently, if you go on YouTube, you'll see a down deep digging of history on Horace Greeley. Horace Greeley, a presidential candidate from Chautauqua County, his native Chautauqua County, and who, guess where he hung out? Clymer, New York. Clymer, Chautauqua, presidency, Doug Neckers. He brought up programs. I see we're being covered by WGTE. They seem to be familiar. They followed us to Chautauqua. They did a whole weeks-long program there. And he created, to advance that intellectual curiosity and that intellectual honesty, created an Albert Neckers Fund to fund students to attend at the Jackson Center. He challenged the center and me to expand our academic vision to achieve his goals and our goals. A week before his passing, we talked for 30 minutes on that specific mission. He was a force. Now, I'm not telling you anything new in the front row here. He was a force. And a man of action who didn't suffer fools lightly. He left a legacy many places, but especially in his native Chautauqua County. I have met many people in my career, but never a Renaissance man like Doug Neckers. He believed our words and actions today have meaning tomorrow. His did and will. Rest in peace, Doug.
Okay, for those who don't know me, my name is Alex Medjuritsky, and I'm one of the students of Dr. Neckers and later his co-worker. My deepest condolences to the family, and I'm very privileged to have been asked to talk about Doug. I wasn't sure exactly how to put it all together. Hope I won't be too long. But as Greg said, he lived a long life, and he touched a lot of people. So a few days after his passing, Spectra's new vice president of manufacturing, who never met him, he came in one morning and he held the obituary from the blade. And he said, "I know you've been a student of his. This is one of the longest obituaries that I have seen. and no doubt signifying the life of one accomplished individual." So Tony, this vice president, he barely knew the man. He was hired after Doug already retired from Spectra, but he could not have characterized him any better. Prominent, accomplished individuals, they rarely come without controversy, and such was Doug Neckers, a complex human being who no doubt influenced my life and life of many others. He was devoted, he was passionate, but not always easy to get along with. Driven by his ideas and vision, often to the point of obsession, exerting his will and influence, but ultimately wishing well for the world, the organizations that he worked for, and people around him. I would be lying to you if I didn't benefit from Doug's strong opinions and actions. When he set his sights on something, he would drill deep, and he got his way. So way back in late 80s, he decided that Bowling Green State University chemistry department needs to elevate its stature by instituting a PhD program in chemistry. And once told that he can't be really duplicating something Ohio State already has, he basically invented, at least he told me he invented it, a whole new area of chemistry called photochemical sciences. If he didn't push his vision to the trustees in Columbus, many of us in the back row, we wouldn't be here probably. When his original student enrollment into the program wasn't doing too hot, he saw the light of the Soviet Union crumbling apart and decided that those students from the former Soviet Union would be a prime recruiting target. The fact some of us didn't speak English, couldn't pass TOEFL, it didn't matter much. He forced the notion onto a graduate college in the English department that once here, he, quote unquote, he'll teach them English. And so the spigot was open. People started coming, rules be damned. And so I have to give credit where credit is due, that if it wasn't for the Center for Photochemical Sciences at BGSU and the way we were able to join that program, maybe I would get to the United States eventually, but there's no way I would have a better launching pad for my life and professional career. So after a couple of years of struggle while in the program, it was not entirely my fault, I figured I'd take my talents elsewhere and transfer. I remember coming into his office one day and telling him about being accepted into Washington State Materials Science School. He was very disappointed. However, he didn't stop typing yet another email or paper that he was editing at the time. And he suggested that instead of transferring elsewhere, I transfer into his group to do actually some serious polymer surface science finally, whatever that meant, since, quote unquote, I was decent enough student. Once in his group, his mentorship style was basically sink or swim. You had to find your own way, and I hope I mostly swam. To join his group was a momentous decision, followed a year or so later by the ask to become, again, quote unquote, the head of the group. I asked him, like, who, me, why me? There were a number of seasoned, experienced postdocs around. He said, you need to demonstrate some leadership. And so the issue was decided. In 1997, after my PhD defense and the one job offer, which didn't promise a green card filing on my behalf, he suggested I stick around for a year or so to help him sort out that intractable Navy project he was going at the Spectra Group, the company he founded. For those of us who knew how Dr. Neckers made his grant proposals, he promised the world and then figured out he would find a way to get there somehow. With the help of other people he would direct. When I questioned him how we're supposed to come up with these deliverables, he suggested to be daring, do some quote-unquote surface science again, and basically make it work. 1 year of industrial postdoc eventually led to 25 more years, basically a lifetime for me at Spectra, again, the company he founded. So staying at Spectra taught me how to survive in the area of chemical industry, how to be inventive, diplomatic when I needed to be, forceful, and basically to never give up. All qualities I was able to foster in myself, often matching my stubbornness against Doug's, going toe-to-toe with him at times. A lot of people here know we had our fights, but again, I have to admit the man had a vision. Prone to exaggeration just a little. Maybe he didn't invent 3D printing alone, and others were instrumental in the field as well. But he certainly was absolutely ahead of his time for seeing the uses of this technology. Today we enjoy 3D printing benefits in the field of medicine, dentistry, optometry, audiology. We take it for granted. We see it on TV and we read about it in the newspapers and on the internet. But I was there with Dr. Neckers in some meetings at ProMedica or Toledo Hospital here in around late 90s or at the turn of the century, where he suggested the use of 3D printed parts in medical modeling, and he wasn't listened to seriously enough. He was telling people that one of his reasons to find Spectra was to help Andy when he tore his knee. I suffered the same injury, and he was saying how we're going to rebuild a human joint using 3D printing technology. I know how proud he was later when the technology he was advocating for so passionately finally started making those strides when he was in the twilight of his career. Just a few weeks ago, myself and Oleg Grinovich, who is vice president at Spectra, we were on a Zoom call with a startup in Massachusetts, and the guys on the other side shared with us how Dr. Neckers' photochemistry inventions were the foundation of their technology. They knew we were Doug's disciples, and we were very happy to share, they were very happy to share with us the news that Doug was pushing for a consultancy gig with them just a few months ago. Spectra ended up being sold to a company called Formlabs in 2017, a company that became one of the 3D printing leaders, aided, even if in small part, by Spectra's contributions. After the sale, Dr. Neckers didn't want to ride into the sunset, and he was working on his other ideas at BioSolar, but professionally, I interacted with him less after that. Every time we met, though, he was interested in how Spectra was doing and was adamantly checking with me if we, quote-unquote, made it, that together we built a successful business. He often invited me for breakfast and lunch, always making sure I get the bill. After all, he liked to remind me that he was a stingy Dutchman. Most importantly, though, he cared about the people he interacted with. I truly believe that. The people who came up through his group and then spread around the US and the world. His end-of-year newsletters are legendary, and he made it a point of his pride to find out where everyone is who had kids, where their children are going to school or college, to learn the career path that people are taking, the promotions and successes they're having. Never, of course, forgetting to credit the things they learned from him while at BGSU. The last 2 meetings I had with him, we incessantly discussed the subject of the war in Ukraine, the country that I was born in, and what the world is coming to. Till the very end, he was organizing, hoping to shore up some help, while trying to think how we can import Ukrainian scientists here. He clearly had the sense of what is morally right, and provided me with numerous examples of American history and government that he knew so well to prove his points. He was immensely proud that me, my family, and the families of his many other students are here, helping America to get better while leading fulfilling lives. One year at Christmas, instead of normal gifts, he presented a pocket copy of the United States Constitution and said, "That's the best book that's ever been written." The other book I read recently talked about how humans measure happiness by evaluating the meaningfulness of their lives. I don't know if Doug was happy, but he certainly lived a meaningful life, as evidenced by that long obituary in the Blade. Thank you.
So on behalf of the Neckers family, let me thank all of you for attending either online or together in person. And thank you especially for doing the chemistry part of this, Alex. I'm glad I don't have to do it. I'm Doug's younger brother. My name is Bruce Neckers, and I'm not a chemist. I never have been a chemist, but I lived with Doug throughout my childhood. And I'm here to tell you that there were many things that he was proud about, and most importantly, he was proud about his relationship with Clymer, New York. He was born in 1938. His parents were Doris and Carlisle Neckers, and he moved to the small Dutch community of Clymer, New York, just prior to the beginning of World War II. He spent his first 18 years there and was greatly influenced by his home, Clymer Central School, the Clymer Department Store, Abbey Reformed Church, and Chautauqua Institution. During his early years, Clymer was an isolated small town, largely inhabited by those of Dutch extraction. Dutch names in Clymer often end with 3 letters, Inc., I-N-K. I tell people that Doug and I grew up on Ink Road. It was West Main Street. But it was Ink Road because our near neighbors were named Boozink, Beckerink, Gravink, Wasink, Habink, Meyerink, Doink, Arnink, and Fardink. And of course, in a gathering of inks, there was always then and now an occasional Neckers. Our grandfather and father owned and ran the general store in Clymer named the Clymer Department Store, which served the needs of the farmers and others who lived nearby. From his earliest age, Doug worked in the store, stocking shelves, performing cleaning tasks, and serving the needs of customers. He got his early math skills from operating the cash register, which he started at age 6. He could do the basic math by totaling the price of their purchases, accepting their cash, and making change. Doug's interest in music began to appear early as he soloed at war bond rallies at the age of 3. He sang in various choirs in Clymer and the surrounding area and became a talented pianist, singer, trombone player, and of all things, a bassoonist. His inventive nature began early as well. He found an old bassoon in the band room at school. He decided to learn how to play it. There probably was nobody in Clymer that knew how to play it, but he decided to learn it, but it lacked one thing, a reed, which he proceeded to craft out of an old ruler, which allowed him to succeed in playing probably in the only Clymer band person to ever do so. Doug told me recently that in his early years, he was more interested in sports and music than he was in academics. In sports, music, and eventually in life, he became incredibly disciplined. He always battled excessive weight, and he began running daily to get in shape and to lose weight so he could play center on the Clymer's Central School 6-man football team because Clymer didn't have enough students to field 11-man squads. He goofed around in Boy Scouts before deciding to get serious, and a year later he was an Eagle Scout. And then, in his senior year in high school, his basketball team was down by 19 points with 3 minutes to go in the game against our arch rival Sherman. It was the most exciting athletic event I've ever been to in my life. In the remaining 3 minutes, Clymer evened the score, tied it at the buzzer, and won in overtime. Doug had 8 points in the fourth quarter alone. It was an ink squad: Dale Arnick, Squeak Wasink, Everett Bensink, plus Doug and Harvey King. Before he left home for college, Doug became very interested in Chautauqua Institution and the artistic events that it offered. He was drawn there mostly by the musical programs, but as life went on, he also became interested in the lectures that were offered and began lecturing himself on such diverse topics as the quality of water in Chautauqua Lake and an almost obsessive interest in protecting the reputation of Horace Greeley, who has an historic connection to Clymer and ran against President Grant in the election of 1872. Late in his high school years, Doug became a serious student. I'm here to tell you why, because he almost flunked English 3. The regents in New York were important, and if you didn't pass the regents, you didn't pass the course. He got a 65 circled, which meant he had to take it over. And he decided that that was never going to happen again. And he worked and got a passing grade the next time through. But while he was in the 8th grade, his English teacher told our mom that she doubted that Doug was college material. And our mom believed that persons named Neckers did not do well in math. Doug later thought those comments were funny in light of his postdoctoral studies in higher level math at Harvard. He started college at Bucknell in Pennsylvania and finished his undergraduate work at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. 3 years later, he got his PhD from the University of Kansas and set off for postdoctoral studies at Harvard. I knew Doug and I were not on the same academic wavelength when the only thing I could read in his PhD dissertation was the part in which he referenced our parents for their dedication to his education. What I can speak about is the role he played in our family. You know, Doug could be really funny. There's the side that Alex just represented, but there's also the funny side. We had a Christmas celebration every year in which gift giving, sometimes in Doug's case, with the help of Spencer's Gifts, would be a part of what we were doing. Our mom was a refined lady. She also was a bit prudish, particularly as it pertained to things that were said or done in the presence of her grandchildren. One year, her present from Santa got blamed for a lot of things by Doug, was nicely wrapped, probably by Suzanne or Pam. And when she opened it, she discovered that it was a puzzle. What you would think of a puzzle is maybe the Rocky Mountains or something pretty or something like that, but it wasn't. It was a picture of Mama Cass, nude. If you remember, Mama was shall we say, a bit plump. So Mom, with all of her grandchildren watching, decided to figure out a way to hide that gift so that they wouldn't see it. But it gets worse. Mom decided to take the puzzle with her to Florida, where she could give it its proper burial. For some reason, Mom decided to put the puzzle in her carry-on bag, where it was discovered and displayed by the equivalent of TSA people at the airport for all of Mom's fellow passengers to see. True story. The best thing that ever happened to Doug was his relationship with Suzanne Evans Neckers, that many of you know, who he married in 1960 and was his life's companion for more than 60 years. Together they were justifiably proud of Pam and Andy and Elise, Isabel, and Courtney. The connection of the Neckers family with the Evans family was an important part of who Doug was. He identified with both the Evans and their community of Bemis Point. The rest of the family did too. Doug always added something to every group he encountered. He was proud of his Clymer and Chautauqua County roots. He championed Horace Greeley and had considerable pride in his connection with the Robert Jackson Center and Chautauqua Institution. So while I'm proud of Doug's professional accomplishments, my family and I will miss him for who he was as a son, brother, uncle, father, and friend.
In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Well, I only met Doug a little less than a year ago when I came here to St. Timothy's as the interim priest, as the interim rector. So all of you have known him longer than I have. But I'll tell you a couple of stories. I think it was the first day that I was in the office. Might have been the second, but I think it was the first. When Doug came into the office, gave me a lovely pen that writes very well. I can tell all of you have those pens too. And then Doug proceeded to give me a list of things that he wanted me to make happen. I haven't quite gotten through the list, but I'm working on it. And I will say, to his great credit, the one thing that I said no to, and explained why I said no, he was really gracious about that. He then asked me about my political affiliation. I think I gave him the right answer. Because then he said, well, I'm having dinner with our congresswoman in a couple of nights. Why don't you go with me? Have you met her? And I hadn't, and I went with him, and I did get to have dinner with our congresswoman. So we got off to a good start. He told me I should go to Chautauqua the next summer, and I did. And that too was a life-changing experience. It was absolutely wonderful. I don't know that I'd have gotten to Chautauqua absent him. It wasn't that he invited me to go to Chautauqua. It was, you have to go to Chautauqua. And he was right about that. I love hearing every one of the remembrances from the folks who have known him in different ways and known him a long time, and just captured who even I experienced. I think we all have shared in all of that wonderfulness. In everything he did, in absolutely everything he told me he had done, everything you folks have told me he has done, everything he was doing here in the life of St. Timothy's, he was always about making things better. In any situation, he would immediately start figuring out, how can I improve this? What can be done to make this work better, to be more effective for more people? How can I make this better? And there are, you've heard from the remembrances, there are millions of people who are benefiting from the ideas he had and the things he figured out how to do that no one else knew how to do. Millions and millions of people. And it's been a privilege to know him and to hear the stories firsthand from him about how some of those things happened. Any problem he encountered, he immediately started trying to figure it out. Trying to figure out, how do we improve this? How do we solve the problem? Or at least solve the situation for everyone affected by it. I was new here when the situation in Ukraine became so horrible, and he thought of nothing else but how to help the people there, and particularly how to help the academics and the students who are studying, and to really take care of his former students and graduate assistants who are here and separated from the land where they were born. And what a powerful voice he was. I thought twice. I have Ukraine earrings, and I thought twice about wearing them this morning, but I do wear them with a passion that he taught me about the people there. For everyone who knew him, we know that everything he did was to make the world a better place. Absolutely everything. For those of us who loved him, Doug's passing is painful, but we gather here to celebrate his life and give thanks to God for all the many blessings that Doug brought into our lives and the lives of others. And even as he is entering into the nearer presence of God, I can imagine Doug approaching the Creator, the Creator of the whole universe, with the list he's with the list of some things that really ought to be done to change a few things. Insist that God do something about that immediately. And because I know how much the Creator loves God, loves Doug, I imagine God is wrapping Doug in great, strong arms of love and smiling.